The story begins in the ancient land of Canaan, a place promised by the Most High. Imagine for a moment a sunrise over the hills of Judea. The light touches the land, gold and pure. This was the land given to Abraham and his descendants. It was a sacred promise, a covenant between the Creator and his chosen people, the Israelites. They were to be a light to the nations, a people set apart. Their laws were not just rules, they were divine instructions for living a righteous life. Every sunrise was a reminder of this holy agreement, a day to walk in the ways of the Most High and to honor the covenant made with their forefathers. This land was their inheritance, a physical place tied to a spiritual destiny. The covenant was the very heart of the Israelite nation. It shaped their identity, their culture, and their relationship with the world around them. From the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the promise flowed down through the generations. It was renewed with Moses at Mount Sinai, where the laws were given on tablets of stone. These were not the laws of men, but the laws of the heavens, designed to create a just and holy society. The people were taught to remember their history, to tell their children of the miracles and the deliverance from bondage in Egypt. Their entire existence was a testament to the power and faithfulness of the Most High, who had chosen them from all the peoples of the earth. This sacred bond was maintained through worship and obedience. The tabernacle, and later the temple in Jerusalem, was the center of their spiritual life. It was where the presence of the Most High was believed to dwell among His people. Priests from the tribe of Levi performed the rituals and sacrifices, seeking atonement and giving thanks. The holy days, like Passover, Pentecost, and the Day of Atonement, were annual reminders of their history and their covenant. The people gathered to celebrate, to remember, and to recommit themselves to the path of righteousness. It was a life deeply woven with faith, where every action had spiritual meaning, and every day was an opportunity to honor their Creator. But the covenant came with a condition: blessings would follow obedience, but curses would follow disobedience. The prophets, men chosen to speak the words of the Most High, constantly warned the people. They called for justice for the poor, care for the widow and orphan, and a return to true worship. They spoke of a future where foreign armies would be used as a rod of correction if the people turned to idolatry and forgot their God. The history of the Israelites is a powerful story of this divine relationship, a cycle of faithfulness, falling away, warning, and consequence. It is a story of a people bound to a holy promise, learning the hard lessons of obedience under the watchful eye of the Most High. After the glorious reign of King David and his son King Solomon, a shadow fell upon the unified nation. King Solomon, in his later years, was led astray by his many foreign wives, and began to worship their gods. This act of disobedience displeased the Most High, who had blessed him with immense wisdom and wealth. The seeds of division were sown during his reign, as he placed heavy burdens of labor and taxes upon the people, especially the northern tribes. The unity that King David had fought so hard to build began to crack under the strain of Solomon's choices. The people's hearts grew restless, and the once strong kingdom was weakened from within by spiritual decay and social discontent. Upon Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam took the throne. The leaders of the northern tribes came to him with a simple request. They asked him to lighten the heavy workload that his father had imposed. Instead of listening to the wise counsel of the elders, who had served his father, Rehoboam listened to his young, arrogant friends. He answered the people harshly, promising to make their burdens even heavier. He famously told them, "My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions." This foolish and cruel response was the final straw. The 10 northern tribes could no longer accept the rule of the house of David. The 10 northern tribes broke away. They formed their own kingdom, which they called the Kingdom of Israel, or sometimes Ephraim. They made a man named Jeroboam their king. This left only 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, loyal to the house of David. They formed the southern kingdom, which became known as the Kingdom of Judah. Jerusalem remained its capital. The nation was now a house divided against itself. The northern kingdom, under Jeroboam, immediately fell into idolatry. Fearing his people would return to Jerusalem to worship at the temple, he set up golden calves in Dan and Bethel, telling the people these were the gods who brought them out of Egypt. This division was not just political, it was a deep spiritual wound. the northern kingdom of Israel spiraled deeper into idol worship, with a succession of wicked kings who led the people further away from the covenant. The prophets of the Most High, like Elijah and Hosea, were sent to warn them, pleading with them to repent and turn back, but their warnings were largely ignored. The southern kingdom of Judah had its own share of good and bad kings, sometimes returning to the law and other times falling into the same sins as their northern brothers. The once mighty nation, chosen to be a single light, was now two flickering flames, vulnerable and weakened by their internal strife and disobedience. The northern kingdom of Israel continued to ignore the warnings of the prophets. Their society became corrupt, and they worshipped the false gods of the nations around them. The patience of the Most High finally ran out. He used the mighty and ruthless Assyrian Empire as his instrument of judgment. Around 722 BC, the Assyrian armies, led by their powerful kings, swept down from the north. They were a terrifying force, known for their brutal warfare and their policy of deporting conquered peoples. The cities of the northern kingdom fell one by one. The capital, Samaria, was besieged for 3 years before it finally collapsed. The kingdom that had stood for over 200 years was completely destroyed. The Assyrians had a specific strategy to prevent rebellions. They did not just conquer a land, they uprooted its people. The Book of Kings tells us that the king of Assyria carried the Israelites away and placed them in cities of the Medes and in Hala and Habor by the river of Gozan. They were scattered across the vast Assyrian Empire. Their homeland was then repopulated with foreigners from other conquered lands. The 10 tribes of the northern kingdom were effectively lost from the main stage of history. They became known as the 10 lost tribes. They were cut off from their land, their identity seemingly erased by their conquerors. However, the story does not end there. While many were taken captive eastward into Assyria, not all were captured. Many Israelites fled the advancing armies. They ran for their lives, seeking refuge wherever they could find it. Large numbers fled southward, looking for safety. They crossed the Sinai Peninsula and moved into the continent of Africa. They journeyed into Egypt, Ethiopia, and deeper into the African interior. They were exiles, but they carried their culture, their laws, and their memory of the Most High with them. In these new lands, they sought to rebuild their lives, far from the reach of the Assyrians. Africa, a land that had sheltered their ancestors, became a sanctuary once again. These scattered Israelites did not simply disappear. In Africa, they established new communities and even new kingdoms. Over centuries, they blended with the local populations, but they held on to their core traditions. They followed the laws of Moses, practiced circumcision, observed dietary laws, and kept the Sabbath. They became known by different names in different regions, but their oral histories often spoke of a migration from a land in the northeast. They were a people hidden among the nations, scattered as the prophets had foretold. Their journey into Africa was not an end but a new chapter in their long and arduous story of survival and faith. Centuries passed. The southern kingdom of Judah also faced judgment. They were conquered by the Babylonians and the first temple was destroyed. Many were taken to Babylon, but after 70 years, a remnant returned to Jerusalem and rebuilt the temple. This became known as the Second Temple period. Judah, now called Judea, came under the rule of successive empires, the Persians, the Greeks, and finally, the mighty Romans. The Roman Empire was a powerful and unforgiving master. While they allowed the Judeans to practice their religion, they ruled with an iron fist. The land was filled with tension. The people longed for freedom and for the promised Messiah to deliver them from their oppressors. This tension finally exploded into open rebellion. In 66 AD, the Judeans rose up against Roman rule. The revolt was fierce, fueled by generations of resentment and a deep desire for independence. But the Roman Empire would not tolerate such defiance. The Emperor Nero sent his best general, Vespasian, to crush the rebellion. The Roman legions, symbolized by the eagle, descended upon Judea with overwhelming force. They marched through the land, destroying towns and villages. The fighting was brutal, and the people of Judea suffered immensely. The rebellion that had begun with so much hope was turning into a catastrophe of epic proportions. The climax of the war was the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Vespasian's son, Titus, surrounded the holy city with his legions. Jerusalem was crowded with people who had come for the Passover festival, and they were now trapped. The siege was long and horrific. The historian Josephus, an eyewitness, described the terrible suffering inside the city walls. Famine became so severe that people ate whatever they could find: leather, grass, and even their own dead. The city was torn apart not only by the Romans outside, but by warring factions of rebels inside. The once holy city became a place of starvation, disease, and despair. Finally, the Roman soldiers breached the walls. They poured into the city, killing and destroying everything in their path. They fought their way to the temple, the heart of the Judean faith. Despite Titus's reported orders to spare it, a Roman soldier threw a torch into the holy building. The magnificent Second Temple, which had stood for centuries, was consumed by flames and utterly destroyed. It was a devastating blow, a fulfillment of the prophecy that not one stone would be left on another. The fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple marked the end of the Judean state and the beginning of a new, long and painful exile for the people of the southern kingdom. After the destruction of Jerusalem, a small but determined group of Judean rebels, known as the Sicarii, managed to escape. They fled into the desolate Judean desert and found refuge in a seemingly impenetrable fortress. This fortress was Masada, a palace fort built by King Herod on top of a massive, isolated rock plateau. From this high perch, they could see the Roman enemy far below. Here, about 1,000 men, women, and children made their last stand against the might of the Roman Empire. They were the last remnants of the rebellion, a final spark of defiance in a land that had been utterly crushed. They held out for several years, raiding Roman garrisons and surviving in the harsh desert landscape. The Romans could not allow this symbol of resistance to remain. The Roman governor, Flavius Silva, marched the 10th Legion to the base of Masada. The task of capturing the fortress seemed impossible. The cliffs were just too steep to climb. But the Romans were masters of engineering and siege warfare. They began a monumental task. They built a massive siege ramp out of earth and timber against the western face of the plateau. For months, thousands of Judean captives were forced to labor under the hot desert sun, building the very structure that would lead to the downfall of their brethren. Inside the fortress, the defenders watched the ramp grow higher and higher, day by day. As the ramp neared the top, the situation inside Masada grew desperate. The defenders knew their time was running out. Their supplies of food and water, which had been vast, were dwindling under the strain of the long siege. Hunger became a constant companion, sharpening their fear and their resolve. They could see the Roman battering ram being prepared at the bottom of the ramp. They knew that once the wall was breached, the outcome was certain. The Roman soldiers would show no mercy. The men would be killed, and the women and children would be sold into slavery, a fate many considered worse than death. On the final night, with the Roman breach of their wall imminent, the leader of the Sicarii, Eleazar ben Yair, gathered the people. He gave a powerful speech, reminding them of their commitment to freedom. He argued that it was better to die as free people at their own hands than to suffer capture and slavery under the Romans. The people agreed. In an act of ultimate defiance, they chose death over bondage. The men took the lives of their own families and then, drawing lots, killed one another until the last man took his own life. When the Romans finally broke through the next morning, they were met not with a final battle, but with an eerie, tragic silence. Masada became a symbol of the struggle for freedom and the terrible price of defeat. The destruction of Jerusalem in the year 70 AD and the crushing of the Bar Kokhba revolt decades later created a massive wave of refugees. Just as their brothers from the northern kingdom had done centuries earlier, survivors from the southern kingdom of Judah fled for their lives. They scattered in all directions, but a great many sought safety in the south. They traveled through the harsh Sinai desert, a journey their ancestors had made long ago, and crossed into the continent of Africa. They found refuge in Egypt, a land that had a long and complex history with the Israelites. From Egypt, they continued to migrate, moving south along the Nile River and west across the vast expanse of North Africa. Africa proved to be a continent of refuge. It was a place where the scattered tribes of both Israel and Judah could escape the persecution of the Romans and other empires. They found a land where they could live and rebuild. These Israelite communities settled in various parts of the continent, from Libya and Tunisia in the north to Ethiopia and Sudan in the east. Over time, they pushed further west, into the regions that would later become the great West African empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. They brought with them their sacred texts, their laws, and their unique cultural practices. They were a people in exile, but they were determined to preserve their heritage. In these new lands, they did not just survive. They often thrived. They were known to be skilled craftsmen, merchants, weavers, and metalworkers. They established communities, built synagogues, and continued to practice their faith in secret or in modified forms. They intermarried with the local African populations, and their descendants became a part of the rich tapestry of African peoples. Their oral traditions, passed down from generation to generation, kept the memory of their origins alive. These histories often told of a long journey from a land of conflict in the East, a story of exile and the search for a new home. They were Hebrews, black people, living in the heart of Africa. The presence of these Israelite communities had a profound impact on the regions where they settled. Many historians have noted the similarities between ancient Israelite customs and the traditions of various African tribes. Practices like circumcision, dietary laws resembling the kosher laws of Leviticus, and the observance of a weekly day of rest are found in many African cultures. These are not coincidences. They are the echoes of the scattered tribes of Israel and Judah, who carried the laws of the Most High with them into the African continent. Africa was not just a temporary shelter, it became a new home, a place where the flame of their heritage was kept burning, often hidden from the outside world. There is a powerful and prophetic sign of Africa's role as a sanctuary for the Israelites. This sign is found in the early life of the Messiah himself, Yahawashi. After his miraculous birth in Bethlehem, a great danger arose. King Herod, the wicked puppet king of Rome, heard from the wise men that a new king of the Judeans had been born. Filled with jealousy and fear for his throne, Herod gave a monstrous order to kill all the male infants in Bethlehem and the surrounding areas who were 2 years old and under. He hoped to eliminate this prophesied king before he could ever become a threat. It was a time of great terror and sorrow. An angel of the Most High appeared to Joseph in a dream. The angel warned him of Herod's evil plan. The instruction was clear and urgent. "Arise, take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt and stay there until I bring you word." Without hesitation, Joseph obeyed. He woke Mary, and under the cover of darkness, the Holy Family fled. They left their homeland and traveled south, making the same journey that so many of their ancestors had made and would make in the future. They were seeking refuge from persecution, and they found it in the land of Egypt, in Africa. This journey was a fulfillment of prophecy. The prophet Hosea had written, "Out of Egypt I called my son." While this originally referred to the nation of Israel's exodus from bondage, it found its ultimate meaning in the life of the Messiah. Yahawashi, the Son of the Most High, was called out of Egypt to begin his life's work after the danger had passed. His time in Africa was not just a random flight for safety. It was a divinely ordained part of his story, connecting him deeply to the continent and marking it as a place of divine protection. Africa was the land that sheltered the infant Savior when his own land sought to destroy him. This event solidifies Africa's sacred role in the history of the chosen people. It was not just a place of exile, it was a place of preservation. The same continent that would give refuge to the scattered tribes of Israel and Judah first gave refuge to their king and Messiah. This historical fact is a powerful testament to the deep connection between the Hebrew people and the African continent. When the Israelites fled Roman tyranny and scattered into Africa, they were following a path that had been blessed and sanctified by the footsteps of the Messiah himself. Africa was and is a land of refuge, a place where the seeds of Israel were protected and allowed to survive. As the descendants of the scattered Israelites spread throughout Africa, they became deeply integrated into the continent. One of the most significant groups they became a part of is the Bantu peoples. The term Bantu refers to a large group of related languages spoken across a vast area of Africa, from Cameroon in the west to Kenya in the east and all the way down to South Africa. The Great Bantu Migrations, which took place over many centuries, spread people, languages, and culture across the southern half of the continent. It is within this massive movement of people that many of the descendants of the Israelites found their new identity, hidden in plain sight. The connection can be seen in the traditions and oral histories of many Bantu-speaking peoples. Tribes like the Lemba in southern Africa have oral traditions that state they came from a place in the north called Sena. They practice many customs that are strikingly similar to ancient Hebrew traditions. They practice male circumcision, avoid eating pork or other animals forbidden in the book of Leviticus, and their slaughter practices are similar to Jewish kosher laws. They even have a clan, the Buba clan, which they consider their priestly line, and they observe a weekly day of rest. These are not isolated examples. Similar traditions are found among countless other tribes across the continent. These cultural echoes of Zion are too numerous to be a coincidence. They are the living legacy of the Israelites who fled into Africa. While their written records may have been lost over time, their traditions were carefully preserved in their oral histories, their songs, and their daily rituals. The laws given to Moses on Mount Sinai were not forgotten. They were woven into the fabric of new cultures. The memory of their former homeland and their identity as a chosen people was passed down from father to son, from mother to daughter. They became the Igbo of Nigeria, the Ashanti of Ghana, the Tutsi of Rwanda, and many other peoples, each with a unique history that points back to a common origin. The story of their migration is a story of incredible resilience. They crossed deserts, jungles, and mountains. They built new societies and kingdoms. They adapted to new environments while holding fast to the core of their ancient faith. They were a people who were prophesied to be scattered to the four corners of the earth, to be hidden among the nations, and to lose the memory of who they were. The continent of Africa became the primary place where this prophecy was fulfilled. They were hidden, but they were not destroyed. The Most High preserved a remnant, keeping the flame of their heritage alive in the heart of Africa, waiting for the time of awakening. For centuries, the true identity of the scattered Israelites has been one of history's greatest secrets. The descendants of the tribes who fled into Africa and who were later scattered again through the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade were told they were nobody. They were stripped of their names, their languages, and their culture. Their history was erased, and they were forced to forget who they were. The prophecies had come to pass. They had been scattered and sifted among the nations. They had become a people who did not know their own heritage, a people lost not only to the world, but also to themselves. This was the pinnacle of their long and painful exile. But the prophecies also speak of a time of awakening. They speak of a day when the lost sheep of the house of Israel will begin to remember. In the latter days, the Most High promised He would put His Spirit within them and cause them to remember their true identity. We are living in that time now. All across the world, the descendants of the scattered Israelites are waking up. They are reading the scriptures for themselves, studying history, and seeing the undeniable connections. They are recognizing that the curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28, which speak of bondage, scattering, and a loss of identity, perfectly describe the history of their ancestors. This awakening is a spiritual movement, a reconnection to a heritage that was stolen. It is not about claiming superiority, but about understanding a long-hidden truth and embracing a divine inheritance. It is about realizing that the stories in the Bible are not about some other people in a distant land. They are our stories. The patriarchs are our forefathers. The covenant is our covenant. The Messiah came for His lost sheep, and we are those sheep, now hearing His voice, and returning to the fold. This realization is bringing a sense of purpose, dignity, and hope to millions who were told they had no history worth remembering. The story of the lost tribes is not over. It is entering its most exciting chapter. The prophecies say that in the end times, the Most High will gather His people from the four corners of the earth where they have been scattered. He will bring them back to the covenant and restore them. This awakening is the first step in that great gathering. It is a call to return to the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. It is a message of hope, a reminder that no matter how far we have been scattered or how long we have been lost, we have not been forgotten. Our story continues, and the promise of redemption is at hand.